Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Happy 2025. This is the first of our joint talks for this year, and the fifth of the seven talk series. So welcome to everyone. And today's topic is what is awakening? So what a great way to start the year. And maybe I'll just start off and ask Forrest to kick it off for us. How do you define awakening in your own words?
Beautiful. Well, so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking a wonderful way to start would be to show you the lower nervous system. So I have pictures today. This is always fun. So check it out. What happens to your nervous system when it hits about just above your navel? If you can see how it just kind of goes. And I've seen, I couldn't find like a really fantastic picture. I saw a really fantastic picture, and it was just like, you know, it's all consolidated in your spine. It's coming out of the brain. It's very, very together. And then it hits just about your navel. It just goes, it just spreads out like spaghetti on the floor. And so you can kind of see some of that right there. Okay. And then here it is when it comes out of you and it's dissected. You can see why they call it the horse's tail, because it just turns into this big mess, right? And so, the story that I love is called the monkey in the pot, right? And so the hunter goes into the jungle, and he's got to eat. His family's got to eat. His tribe's got to eat. So he's going to hunt the monkeys. And so ingeniously, he puts out a pot, and the pot has a very narrow hole at the top, right? And so at the bottom of the pot, he puts some cheese. The monkey comes along, he reaches in, he grabs the cheese, and now his fist is too big to come back out of the pot. And he won't let go of the cheese. He refuses. And the monkey and the hunter comes and just collects all the monkeys. Just take that one, take that one. And that's how, we could say that's how life comes and collects us, right? We won't let go. And so we're collected. That's the monkey in the pot. And so that's a wonderful way. Delson was talking last time that craving, right? That we get into life. It's a very profound thing that we're doing. We're grabbing onto the world, saying, "This is real. This is it. This is what I have to have," and we're grabbing that cheese, and we won't let go. And that's what causes the pain. Is we won't easily let go and retreat into the upper nervous system. And so we hit that horse's tail, and we just spread out into the world. And we, in 1,000 different ways, we grab onto the world. What was that book that was so popular not too long ago? 50 Shades of Gray, right? This is our 50 shades of attachment or craving, right? Where we're reaching into 50 different pots, because you think, oh, it's not that much. It's just a little bit. But we do it over and over and over again. And all of that just keeps us very, very busy in that horse's tail. And it becomes our whole world. And so we're talking about enlightenment. Well, we're talking about coming back up into this upper nervous system. We're trying to get to the heart, to the throat, to the medulla, to the brain, into the crown, into expansion. And that's a different world. So I was talking to a yogi, and they're like, oh my God, from the third chakra to the fourth chakra, right? From the belly button to the heart, it's this huge track, it's quite a bit of space right there. And they're like, I'm really feeling that the down here in the lower three chakras, it's very, very different. Then I go up into the heart, it's very, very different world. I'm like, that's so perfect. And that's the sensitivity we're trying to create internally in meditation, is the ability to begin to feel that. And they weren't even sure if it was right. They're just feeling it and expressing it. And that was absolutely perfect. But that's it. It's this one world down there and another world up here. And so, if we're talking different systems, it doesn't matter. We're still going to encounter that huge difference. And so, what comes when we come up into the heart? Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. These are only possible to deeply and profoundly experience when we're in the upper nervous system, when we're hanging out and from the heart up. And when we're in that 50 shades of gray, it's not possible. We're locked up. Why is life so hard? Why is life so bad? Because, well, you're in that horrible 50 shades of gray, 50 shades of attachment. And it's just on and on and on and on and on. And you release one, and then there's another. So there's all this cleaning out and work to be done. And so I think we were talking a couple times about, I love the Ramayana. So the Ramayana, Sita is stolen. So we have in the Bhagavad Gita and we have in the Ramayana this reoccurring theme. Somebody is stolen, usually a woman, and the woman is the Kundalini. So the Kundalini is your consciousness, your subconscious, which has been stolen from you. You don't own it. It's been stolen, and it goes out into this 50 shades of attachment and gets locked up. And so Sita is locked up on an island, and then they win the war. They do the war of cleaning, right? the war of Om Chapa in the chakras. They do that. And because of that, they win the war. And then they can retrieve Sita. So they go across the water, they pick her up, and they take her. So she's the Kundalini. They take her off of the island. The island is Earth. That's the first chakra. And then they take her across the water, which is the second chakra. And then to prove herself, she willingly walks into fire. She's like, no, 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 I'm pure. Let me show you. She just walks into the fire, right? That's the third chakra, fire. And then, only then, she doesn't touch Rama before that. Only after walking through the fire does she come and embrace Rama. And Rama is the consciousness of your heart. So we could say he is loving kindness, right? So now you have the return of your subconscious, all of your subconscious processes, that intelligence of the divine, which is backed up. So sometimes we talk about the subconscious, we say subconscious, sometimes we talk about unconscious, same thing, but when you say unconscious, you're alluding to that there's more. That's kind of interesting languaging, right? So you're actually alluding that behind the subconscious, there's this super consciousness, right? And that's, excuse me, that's the divine intelligence, which is behind the Shakti, the divine intelligence behind the Kundalini. And so some of that is returning back to your heart. So we get up into this upper nervous system. We start to encounter real love, and we're getting closer to the deep brain. And that's what we're really after, is the deep brain. So, and that's why you're starting to experience the heart. And so the two exercises I really like, because, we can talk about these things a lot, but if we actually feel them, it gives us a reference to, oh my God, it's real. Oh my God, I can feel it. So if you practice a little bit of the cute baby, and you can try that right now if you like. It's kind of fun. So it's easier if you have a picture, maybe. So if you have a picture and it just grabs your heart instantaneously, then that's really great. So it can be anything cute. It can be a llama, it can be a cute baby, it can be a chihuahua, anything that you look at and it just grabs you instantaneously. But if you can think of something, the cutest thing that you have seen lately, and that can light up your heart just a little bit, if you can do that, right now you're tasting part of your deep brain. You're tasting the left amygdala. And that's amazing. So try that out. Just think of something really cute or something that really tickled your funny bone in a joyful way. And it can even be something divine. So for a very long time, I had a picture of Mother Mary, and it was just the only picture that I could find that really touched my heart as soon as I looked at it. So I was actually in the ashram. I was looking for a picture of Divine Mother. I couldn't find one. All the pictures didn't touch my heart. And then I found this one picture of Mother Mary. It was black and white. It was very, very simple. And as soon as I looked at it, it would grab my heart. And I didn't have all this cute baby meditation language that I use today. But that was my cute Divine Mother. That was I could look at the picture and bam, I would go straight into love. And I would just stare at that. That's a form of that's what the cute baby is teaching you, how to do that kind of thing, right? So I love that because now you're actually touching the correct part of your brain. And so it's not mystical, it's not floating in the air, it's right here. And you just did it. If you tasted a little bit of that, oh my God, it's so cute. If you tasted that a little bit today or another day, then that's your proof. That love, that bliss. So then, okay, oh my God, Forrest, it was so small. Well, okay, yeah, but once you get into it, it gets bigger. And so you take that little experience. Okay, I just felt this much love. And then you multiply it by 1,000, and now you know where you're going. It's like, okay, that's where we're going. And then the other side of the deep brain is in your right brain, and it's the right hippocampus. So the right hippocampus holds, this is so cool. Your left brain is labeling everything. So I look at the tree and my left brain says tree, Tree. It labels it, right? All that labeling. Anything that you see and you know what it is, you're instantly labeling it, right? And then your right brain holds the knowledge of what it is. So the actual knowing is in your right brain. And so the labels on the left and the knowing of what it is, it's on the right. And it comes with a picture. And with the picture comes light. So the actual picture of the tree in your mind, the knowing of what it is, that's in the right. And the light is in the right. So now we have all knowing and all light in the right brain, in the right hippocampus. And then, so when we taste that, we come into silence. We get out of the yakety yak part of the brain and we come into silence. And so the exercise that I love is hakalan or hakalau. You can say it either way. So you just stare straight ahead. And we did this already, didn't we? You just stare straight ahead and then take in all of your vision. Go ahead and try this now. Just take in all of your vision and kind of look at it. Oh my God, it's one huge circle, isn't it? Your vision is just one big circle of everything that you can see. And so don't look at the part in the center. Try to notice everything on the outside edge. Just look at that. Just notice only that. And now when you do that, now come out of that for just a moment and look at all the labels, everything that's in front of you that you can label. Label, label, label. It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. Okay, I've got a wall, I've got shutters, I got windows, I got carpet, I got TV, blah, 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 right? Label all of that. see the labels, and now go into the peripheral vision and try to notice the point where the labels stop being there. This is my favorite part. Just notice, stare straight ahead, notice your peripheral, and keep noticing the peripheral until the labels disappear. That's right. Isn't that beautiful? When the labels disappear, you are touching the right brain. You're not fully identified with it, or you'd be in a samadhi, but you're touching it. You are touching the right hippocampus, and the labels are gone. You got out of the left brain enough. You touched deeply enough into the right brain. The label, and maybe it happened like that. Maybe it was like it was there and then it was gone. Like the labels came right back. That's fine. You actually touched it though. That's your right hippocampus. And so if you can multiply that times 100 times 1,000, well, now you're tasting samadhi. You're tasting the non-dual state. And so, every time you drink some of that hakala, oh my God, I'm drinking a little martini of samadhi, just a tiny little one. I just had a sip of samadhi right there. Isn't that gorgeous? So it's not elusive. It's not, we've got a nervous system. We've got a huge difference between the lower and the upper. And now we've tasted the deep brain. It's just right there. It's just right there waiting for you. And so there are so we have Kriya, we have Delson, we have everything, and we have lots of different ways of describing things, but it's all in you. So you can't get away from it. You can't, sometimes we feel like, oh my God, this is all so elusive, but it's right there. It's right there inside of you. So I thought I'd start with the nervous system and the deep brain. And so funny story, I was putting together my third training, and I'm in the middle of it, and I'm just kind of in the flow, just talking through everything I need to talk about in the training. And then I say, and I'm watching myself say it, look, it's only three things. And I'm inside of myself watching myself say that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's only three things. Oh my God. And that's really it. It's your spine, it's your left amygdala, and it's your right hippocampus. And that's it. And I'm not saying that sometimes people are like, oh, so you're saying it's not God. There's no higher intelligence. There's no consciousness. There's everywhere, it's just your brain. No, 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 no. I'm saying these are the specific parts of your brain which are activated as you experience that. And so when you know exactly how those parts of your brain work, which now we do, cute baby, hakala, we know how those work right now. That just happened. We know how those work. And so, and the spine, that's just make the out breath long. That HRV resonance, that's the beginning of it. And so now you have a really good handhold on how this actually works inside of you. So now once you know how those parts work, you can make them work. So whatever system you're using, if you're using my system, Delson systems, Kriya Yoga, another system, anything that you're using, you know how they actually work. And that's what makes it really powerful, when you get that working knowledge of it.
Amazing. So I'm just going to tell you also what the next question is, and then I'll see what you want to respond to. I'm curious, what are some of the most common misconceptions about awakening?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I wanted to just give some correlates to what Forrest was saying in terms of the context of the jhanas as well, and what we're doing there, because there's a lot of interesting correlates there. So Forrest first talked about the first three chakras, right? Those are where we're rooted in like the world, we're rooted in basically money, sex, and power, which aren't a bad thing. It's just that the way the world and most people have looked at it is, oh, you don't talk about that, or you don't touch it and all of that. But there's a way to not only transcend it, but include it. Use the words of, integral theory. Uh, and so when we think about the process of the jhanas, when we're going through it, we're transcending that, just like in Kriya Yoga. What are we doing first? We are letting go of the hindrances. These hindrances are rooted in these first three primarily. They might be in other places as well. I mean, there can be challenges with the heart where it feels blocked. You can't feel the loving kindness, so we do forgiveness, for example. But in terms of a very plain road, as we're going through this process, when we let go of the hindrances, now we're getting into the first jhana. So we start with the loving kindness. We bring up the loving kindness in the heart. And now we're starting to experience some joy. We're starting to experience some bliss. We get into the second jhana. Now that thinking part of the brain, or thinking part of the mind, which says, I have to do this and I'm planning to do this and all of that, that gets silent in the second jhana. And in the third jhana, we stop having contact with the body. And in the fourth jhana, by then, we're up in the head. We're experiencing an awareness up in the head. And then by the time we get into the fifth jhana, we're starting to experience expansion. And so when Forrest was talking about Hakala and looking at the periphery, it reminded me of a specific object of meditation that's known as casinas. Not casinos. We're not going into, slot machines and things like that. We're talking about casinas, right? Whole other thing. And that means wholeness, WHOLE, where we are expanding outward. So we're actually expanding a periphery. What are we experiencing there? We're experiencing greater spaciousness. And then the rest of that with regards to omnipresence in terms of infinite space, infinite consciousness, and then this field of nothingness. The little me, the little I is starting to, go away, which is to say all of those little parts of us that keep thinking about this and that and all that other stuff. And we come to the quiet mind, the neither perception nor non-perception. And then we're there. We're in that space, in that samadhi, as we would refer to it, in that non-dual state, or reaching towards the hem of the non-dual state. So I just wanted to contextualize that for how we would look at it from the perspective of jhanas. It's really great, really greatly correlates. So what was the question, John?
Yeah, no, I just so it's sort of leading on from there of what are some of the common misconceptions about awakening?
Huh. Interesting. So I think this really depends on the level of um cultural conditioning that's there in a person, because the misconceptions that might arise depend upon what kind of culture a person is coming from, perhaps not only religion and spirituality, but in terms of how their forefathers have looked at the world, their world view. So for example, some of the misconceptions that might arise is that there is for example, in not Christian mysticism necessarily, but the more regular Walmart style of Christianity, which is, standardized sort of, church and whatnot, is that I have to be saved by Jesus Christ, and that's my salvation, and therefore that's my awakening. Person who grows out of it, a person who has another experience of mysticism, understands it as apotheosis, where it's like I am becoming one with Christ. I am becoming Christ. I'm experiencing Christ consciousness. Within the culture of Hinduism, the misconceptions might arise that we have to experience all of these different rituals, and we have to do all of the different things that are attributed in the Vedas, and only then will we experience moksha. Only then will we experience salvation. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, that's what Krishna says. It says, "Do the work, the action." But you are not to look at the outcome of the action. He kind of flipped everything on its head, even with regards to the the ritual aspect of it. Just do it, and then everything else will take care of itself. In let's say, Buddhist circles, there's the idea of the extinguishment of the self, or the extinguishment of the illusion of what is seen as self, by understanding what is emptiness and not self, and so on. Why am I mentioning all of these particular things? Because when we become attached to one particular cultural worldview, we're not able to take the entire field, which ultimately is all leading to the same thing. The irony is, through the evolution of the Vedas, there have been all of these ritualistic ideas and things that come up, but there's some great potent truths in the Vedas, including this, that which we know as the truth. There are many ways leading to it. So if we get bogged down by the nitty gritty of how to get there in a way where this is the only way, then that's going to actually limit us from getting to that ultimate truth. And I think there's also projections of what people see as awakening. People may think the misconceptions of awakening mean that now I can walk on water, I can become a bootlegger like Jesus Christ and turn water into wine. I can, do all kinds of different siddhis. I can read people's minds. I can do this. Or I'll never feel angry again. I'll never feel frustrated again. I'll never feel sexual desire again. All of these things, there's a cultural projection of perfection, which these misconceptions about awakening stem from.
Interesting. That sort of leads me to the question of what role bliss plays in awakening. And I would just sort of frame it that, I've heard a lot of Buddhist teachers say that getting attached to bliss is sort of a sidetrack. And some teachers are even sort of think that bliss itself is an obstacle and so on. Maybe I'll start with you, Delson, and then ask Forrest the same question.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched upon this a few sessions ago, but specifically, what I remember saying about this is that bliss is just the first step. It's a very vital step because you want to experience that bliss. That bliss is what feels nourishing to the soul, feels nourishing to the mind. Indeed, bliss is an emanation of that experience, of God or awakening or enlightenment or whatever it is. But it is a part and parcel of it. It's not it itself, because, as I say, it's an emanation of it. And so if we get stuck on the bliss part of it, then we're missing out on what else is available to us, because the bliss leads to further refinement of that experience of joy and bliss, which leads to equanimity, which leads to a more quiet mind. And so even Ramana Maharishi talked about this. He said, don't get stuck on the bliss. The bliss is great, but there are other levels or layers to it where you're experiencing greater and greater degrees of calm and collectedness. And then from there comes the awakening.
Cool. And over to you, Forrest.
Thanks. Beautiful. Yeah, there's a beautiful part of the Bhagavad Gita where it says very clearly, at a certain point, you're even going to renounce the process of samyama. You're going to renounce the very thing which gave you the samadhi. And I like to think about that. And so I'm going to relate this back to bliss, but I like to think about that. You're on a date and you're a teenager. It's your like first date or something, and you're very hyped up and you've got all these ideas in your head which come from other people. They don't come from a natural outpouring of your heart. It's just all this junk in your head, and you're like, I've got to get to third base, and it's a wonderful way to ruin your date, right? And it's the same thing for the yogis, whether it's samadhi or it's bliss. And you're like, I got to get to the bliss, or I got to get to the samadhi, right? And now it's all these labels, it's these conceptions in your head, and you're not actually in the date. Or in our case, you're not actually in the meditation. And so this kind of relates back to your previous question. And we so often build a castle in the sky. We build up this idea that what we think we're supposed to be doing, or we think we're supposed to be getting, whether it's bliss or samadhi, we build it up, all this idea in our head. And all of that is taking place, by the way, in the left hippocampus. You're just making all this stuff up in your left brain. And so that's not real. And so you're like, let me cart in like all this baggage of my left brain. Let me just cart it into our date, divine. Let's do that. And the divine's like, no, I don't think that's going to fit. That's not going to fit on our date. The car is only so big. You can't bring all that luggage. But no. This is important luggage. This is spiritual luggage. Spiritual. See, it even says on the outside of the package here, it says spiritual. This is spiritual luggage. And the divine's like, no. We don't need all of that. No. I really do. So I got this, I love this story. I got this call from this guy in India, right? And it's like, I really want to talk to you because what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And so people call me up, right? And they have a problem. They have something where I'm going to help them, and I'm listening very attentively, very conscientiously. What is the problem? And he goes, so I go into meditation and my mind stops. And I'm like, and he's talking like this for quite some time. I'm like, how is this a problem? This is not a problem. This is fantastic. I mean, you should be out in the park. You should be out in the street celebrating. My mind stops. I go into meditation. My mind just stops. And finally, I'm like, well, so how is this a problem? Where's the problem? He's like, I don't know what happened to me. Like, how is this possible? I didn't start this way. I was meditating, and then this started to happen. I'm like, okay, what happened before that? I'm like, something happened before that. And he describes this experience. And I'm like, oh my God, well, that was a samadhi. That's why. So this guy had one samadhi, and it was so sometimes this happens. You kind of fall, some of us, we kind of fall into the cave, and then some people just tumble straight in. And so this guy just tumbled straight deep into the right brain, had this profound experience, and it was enough of a charge in his brain that now every time he comes to meditate, the thinking mind completely stops. So he's coming deep into the right brain every single time. So I tell him, well, what you just described is a non-dual state. It's a samadhi. You lost your body. You couldn't find it at all. You lost your breath, all of that. You lost it. You couldn't find it. That's a non-dual state. By definition, it's just the expanse. That's by definition, that's the non-dual state. He goes, no, it's not a samadhi. I'm like, what? What? Hello? What? You're calling me and you're telling me. He's like, no, it can't be, because I went to all these yogis in southern India and they all told me, look, you're not seeing the spiritual eye on a regular basis and you're not going out of body on a regular basis. Therefore, the experience that you had is not that deep. I'm like, I don't care what they said. You went into the non-dual state. You just described the non-dual state. And if you look at that and you look at the supposed problem that you have, not understanding what happened to you, it fits like a key. You're having this deep meditations because you fell into this very deep experience, and you've been able to retrieve it. And hallelujah, that's wonderful. He goes, oh, okay, but it couldn't have been so you see, these other yogis had these mental structures. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that, and then you're qualified to have the experience that you actually had. And sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes it gets in the way. And in this case, it was obviously getting in the way. And so I'm like, no, that was a non-dual state. Congratulations. That's why you're having these deep meditations. He goes, no, I don't think so. It couldn't have been a samadhi because it didn't last forever. It didn't last 2 days. I'm like, who told you it's going to last 2 days? It's like, well, that's where all the stories go. These yogis, they stay in this state for 24 hours or 48 hours. I'm like, yeah, after they've been doing it for 20 years, then it happens that long. You don't, it's not going to start that way. It's like anything else. It's going to be short. It's like, oh, and And then he got it. So we broke through this mental construct that he had. So, you know, if you have that mental construct so that's why I love to say, you know, sit down and notice. Sit down and notice. Okay, I did the Kriya. Well, great. You did the do. Now, what did you notice afterwards? I had this wonderful woman. I might have told this story already on these chats. So if I repeat myself, it's because it's a good story. So I'm talking this wonderful yogini, and she goes, you know, I'm going to this meditation class, and you know, there's this woman, and she had this beautiful experience. She saw her crown, and it just exploded, and it was so beautiful, and there was all this light, and blah blah blah. And she's like, I don't have that. I don't have. So there's this craving, right? Spiritual craving. I don't have that. And so I'm like, look, stop looking at other people's experiences and thinking that's it. Because what's going to happen is you're not going to notice what is actually happening to you because you're stuck in a mental concept of somebody else's experience. And she goes, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. And then she proceeds to tell me, well, I had this feeling and I went up my spine and I came up into my brain and the top of my head just opened up. It just felt like it was open. I'm like, that's the same experience. Can you not see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You had the same experience that that lady had, and she had a vision of it, and you had the feeling of it. It's the same experience, but you were so wrapped up in the concept, you couldn't figure it out by yourself, right? She needed somebody else to point it out. She's like, oh my God. And so that's the problem of building up whether it's somebody else's castle, like, okay, I have to read minds and I have to walk on water and all my desires are going to instantly drop off. You know, that's probably something somebody else told you, or you build up your own ideas and you just build up this left brain castle. It's not real. And so you have to do the thing, the technique, and then actually notice, and then you can actually feel what you are feeling or see what you are seeing, whatever that might be. And then you start to get a clue. So, yeah, what was the question? We were talking about.
I think we covered it.
We were
I
talking about casinos, right? Casinos and slot
Casinos, that's
machines.
right. That's right.
no, I think there's a sequel coming on, which is 50 Shades of Gray Matter. And that's going to leave a mark.
I love it. I love it.
So okay, well, this raised an interesting question, which is, you know, and this comes up quite a lot of sort of, well, someone told me that I'm awakened, or someone told me that I'm not awakened. And so I'm really curious for both of your thoughts on, you know, sort of gauging, you know, given that we, you know, there's wishful thinking, but then there's also like, you know, who could know my experience better than myself? Uh, Sort of that balance between what others think and our own experience. I wonder if we could, whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah. Shall I go for it?
Please.
Yeah. So yeah, I think yeah, based on what Forrest was just saying about that, right? The South Indian yogi said, well, you didn't experience the spiritual eye and you didn't do this and you didn't experience that, and therefore you're not experiencing samadhi or a non-dual state. And I think this reminded me of a quote from the Shiva Sutras. It's this, I think it's the second. Yeah. So the first quote is Shiva Chaitanya, which means Shiva is consciousness. And we're not talking about our limited mind consciousness. We're talking about the overall, you know, arching non-dual experience. And then the second is, this is an interesting one, Jnanam Bandhanam, which means knowledge is a bondage. Knowledge binds. And so this comes back to the misconceptions and these ideas, these preconceived notions from the culture and religiosity and so on, that in order for us to be awakened, these are the things that we have to check off. And so somebody will come to you and say, well, I'm going to assess you for a whole year, and I'm going to see if at any point you get angry about something, if at any point, you make a mistake in all of these things. And only then will you get a certificate of enlightenment that says you are now fully awakened, right? So I think it really comes down to our ability to use. So, okay, so again, back to, Indian understanding, which is there's something called Shruti and there's something called Smriti. And Shruti means that which is heard. And this is the wonderful inspiration that came as a result of many, many decades of meditative practice by the sages, by the rishis, who then took that, decoded what they experienced, and then re-encoded that into the Vedas. And so the Vedas are seen as the Shruti, that which is heard. That which is remembered are things like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, um, perhaps even the Upanishads, if I'm not mistaken, but anything that is to be remembered. But they take their basis from Shruti, that which is heard. In other words, there is a tradition that goes down in a lineage of different people who've experienced this awakened state. And they talk about certain commonalities in their experiences. There is an experience of expansion, there's an experience of the non-dual, there's an experience of bliss, there's an experience of the snuffing out of the little eye, which then dips into the great ocean of the larger eye, which is the Purusha, In the Vedas, they talk about the Purusha Suktam. It is the thousand-headed, thousand-eyed, thousand-armed. In other words, it's all pervading everywhere, all at the same time, everywhere, right? So that is how they start to bring that experience down into the verbal language of how we can kind of understand it. But some things might get lost in translation when they're conveyed because a person might take it and now they already have preconditioning and they're taking that and they're saying, okay, that's what it means. And so if we were to take that particular uh, phrase, thousand-eyed, thousand-armed, thousand-headed, literally, now we're thinking, okay, that means I need to find a way to become thousand-headed. I need to find a way of how I can grow extra limbs. This might be far-fetched and exaggerated, but I'm saying there is that level of thinking that takes the mythos and makes it literal. That's why the Bhagavad Gita has so many different interpretations, depending upon the person who's experienced whatever they've experienced. But the Bhagavad Gita is its own thing. And if you take it quite literally, there's a lot of magical, mythical elements in it. But if you start to look at it as a lot of encoded symbols and encoded understandings and insights that you can start unpacking from that territory of a mind that is looking at from being awakened or looking at it towards awakening. Now you start to see what that means. It means Krishna is the controller. He's beyond the five, the Pandavas. He's the one who's calling all the shots. Pandavas are the ones who have to deal with, cleansing themselves and going through this battle of dealing with the Kauravas, who are the hundreds of different kinds of thoughts coming in the form of all kinds of hindrances and distractions and attachments and so on and so forth. Now that makes a lot of sense if you come from that standpoint. Earlier, Forrest was talking about the Ramayana. It's a great way of understanding the journey up the chakras as Sita goes from Sri Lanka, the island, all the way up into Ram, the heart. So, I think this whole process of, it has to be this way, and it is the gospel. And so that's how I've learned it. In the Theravadan model, we have the 4 stages of awakening, and those are tied to the 10 fetters. But there are people who have experienced what is talked about in the suttas, in the Pali Canon, and not necessarily had the same experience of the 10 fetters. So it could be that these can be insertions later on, or these could be interpreted by a certain kind of group, like maybe a monastic community or perhaps a more ultra orthodox community of a specific kind of spirituality that says this is the kind of perfection that we're looking for. But I think if we start to go dig deeper down into seeing the commonalities of what it means to be awakened, even then, those are just cultural projections. There's the concept of the Jivan Mukta, which is liberated while living. They are this way, they are that way, they do this, they do that. I'm in Goa right now, very, very close by to where I'm staying. There's the Dattatreya temple. Dattatreya is this incarnation of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And he is seen as an avadut, and he has his own thing called the Avaduta Gita, and he talks about how the sky is, his home. The sky is his ceiling, the earth is his home, and so on. Everybody will describe their experience in very poetic terms. Does that mean now for me to be awakened, I don't have a house and I have to be wandering around in the forest and all of these things? There's in the Gita, or aside from that, where that talks about the 24 gurus that he has. Somebody asks him, who is your guru? And he says, I have 24 gurus, and they are the earth, the fire, the air, the sky, the ocean, the rivers, the courtesan, the bumblebee, the butterfly, the caterpillar, all of these different things that he starts to attribute to how he learns what needs to be let go of, how to live life in a way that is in the flow of the energetics of life. So if I send to you when you're on one of my retreats a certificate of enlightenment and say, congratulations, now you are enlightened, know that that's not coming from me. That's somebody else, either a doppelganger or somebody who is impersonating me and telling you that you're awakened. Nobody can verify it for you. You can verify it by going back to the original, or as original of the sources as possible, and then continue to refine that understanding of what that means. And the beauty of, I think, the process of awakening is that it is a verb. You're continuously evolving through this practice and through this process. And there are ways in understanding what that means to wake up. What does it mean to wake up? To wake up from the dream of this illusion of the matrix of our sense bases, and what the mind does to interpret that as a world. There's something beyond that, which is going beyond the matrix. And you wake up to that. You understand the dream of this existence and come to the reality. You wake up to that. But there are other aspects to that waking up that come concurrently, like letting go of our cultural attachments to things. Because if we see that they don't serve us and they're getting in the way of living life in a way that is more meaningful and joyful and free, then what is the point of holding on to those attachments? So there are other aspects. There's also the shadows that you have to work with, which happen to be the karma that you're dealing with in each of the chakras. Those continue to happen. So long as you are in this body, you may be a Jivan Mukta, but you are not fully free until you completely let this body dissolve, which only happens at the very end in any case. So I think if you look at it that way, that it isn't a target to achieve, that it is an ever evolving process where, yes, I have had a glimpse into the nature of reality, and I can touch that whenever I want through my process and practice of samadhi. But so long as I come back into the relative world, I still have to deal with all of the natures of other people, the gunas, as I mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. I'll give you one little story from the Upanishads. It's about this great sage who has a student, and he's talking about the ultimate, the Brahman, the reality, the ultimate reality. And he speaks from his understanding. He tries to bring it back down. He says, everything from this cup to this table to all of it is Brahman. I am Brahman, you are Brahman, you are that, I am that. It is all one and the same thing. It's all there. And so the student just, oh, wow, this is amazing. This is great. I finally understood what that means. And so the student is walking around and he somehow finds himself in a parade of different people coming in, and there's a big elephant there. And he says, this is okay. It's all Brahman. Nothing's going to happen. It's everything is Brahman. I am Brahman. The elephant is Brahman. Nothing will come to harm. And what happens? The elephant tramples him. Somehow he survives. And his teacher said, what happened? He said, I looked at everything as Brahman, but then, the elephant came tumbling down on me. So this is the misconception that happens, that people look at it all, and that's the process of spiritual bypassing. They bypass all of the gunk that comes with the relative world that you still need to deal with. But guess what? Now you have a certain level of wisdom emanating from the glimpse of that reality. And so every time you're dealing with that gunk, you can understand, oh, I understand that this is what's happening right now, and I have the tools and the wisdom to deal with it as and when it comes, instead of pushing it away, instead of bypassing it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's the ticket. Everything that we're using, everything that we're teaching, everything that's in the Kriya system, that's in the jhanas, all of this it's all a tool. It's all giving you a glimpse, and that glimpse keeps informing you again and again, right? And that gets bigger, it gets stronger inside of you. Your access to it gets bigger, it gets stronger. And then you can overcome some of the gunk that comes, right? So beautifully said. I totally agree.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. It kind of leads me to something I've always wanted to explore further, which is there's this idea of axes of development, which I think Daniel Ingram is one person who's mentioned it, and of course Ken Wilber and so on. That on the one hand, and so some people have framed it that you have the axis of insight or wisdom, and then you have the axis of embodiment or activity. And so I'm kind of curious. I know, Forrest, looking at the different chakras that you're going through, these different axes of development by clearing those chakras, right? So I'm curious about that. How would the awakening experience, let's say you've had this very deep awakening experiences, how would that reflect in the embodiment or in behavior? And then taking it a step further, there's another teacher who talks a lot about group awakenings, and so and that we're moving as a species towards more people awakening in groups, and so I think this is how sort of like taking the step from a wisdom which is just for me that nobody else really knows about, to that sort of extending out into my activity and being manifest, and then becoming something that is happening to more than just one person, but actually affecting society and groups. Curious about your thoughts on all that.
Absolutely. Well, there's a beautiful story about Lahiri Baba where they say, sir, would you talk about, so they're basically the same question they asked Lahiri Baba. And he says, well, let me just go into the chakra and then I'll tell you what I feel. And that's where the story ends. Like that's as much as we know. We don't know what he said in response. And so we kind of have to recreate that. But the first chakra, so we're really down at the end of it. And as it manifests in your brain. So the first and the second chakra. So I was reading Todd Murphy, and it was really interesting. He goes, I couldn't find a corresponding reference for the first chakra inside of the brain. I'm like, oh my God, I know why. It's a twin. The first and the second chakra are twins. And so they're really the same. And so in his explanation, it was very interesting. He skipped to the second chakra and he started explaining the second chakra, which is sex, right? And so that's sex and water, right? And so this watery, lustful sensuousness, and we need that, right? We need some of that when we eat, for example. Oh my God, this tastes good. we have to know that so we can keep eating. Otherwise we'd stop. But so that's that second chakra, and it's also wound up with the first chakra, which is our really profound hands-on security. I have to have a house, I have to have a floor, I have to have that beginning of security, right? But when your consciousness actually descends into it, there's actually an example of this. And so it was in, I believe it's World War One. It might have been World War Two. I'm not sure. But this poor guy was stuck in a foxhole, and I believe it was in France. And everyone around him had died. And there was just this continuous mortar fire, right? And he retreated in his consciousness to the point where it was just, I'm just here, and not in a spiritual way. He says, I was only here. I could not cognize over there, couldn't even contemplate what that was. And there was only right now. And so if there was something to eat, it was right now. If there was, it was just moment to moment in a very negative, confining way, where he was just living pure, pure, pure survival. And he couldn't even contemplate later. It was just, there was no, so it's not a spiritual thing. It was just a complete reduction of his consciousness to a very animalistic kind of consciousness. So very, very interesting. That's the possibility of the reversion of your consciousness all the way down to the first chakra, right? And then in the second chakra, it's this tribal consciousness, and you begin with that. So I think I told this story already in another chat that we had, where I can actually remember the point where, because my mom couldn't answer a question, I'm like, oh my God, I have to figure this stuff out myself. And in that moment, I actually felt myself split from her. And so she was over there and I was over here. And before, we were more joined as one, as a tribe, not in a, so sometimes we think about these things, we're like, oh, that sounds so spiritual. Well, in a way, but it's very limiting. It was the child's consciousness in that tribe is limited. And then it grows up and it becomes an individual. And that's the third chakra. And so the third chakra is very selfish. And so you'll see the kids enter into this phase where they're very, very narcissistic. And that's normal. They have to have some of that to say, oh, well, I am a person and I have needs and I have goals and I have things that I want to accomplish. And then as a parent, you temper all of that and you say, yeah, that's good. And let's come up into our hearts a little bit and just to figure out a little bit of empathy. And I remember my mother telling me over and over again, put yourself in that person's shoes, put yourself in that person's shoes, put yourself in that. How did they feel? And that was the hands-on empathetic training that I had as a child. And so that teaches us to come up into the heart just a hair. And now you're living as, and this is really where we find ourselves in a Western society, that we have some of that. Some of that is baked into the culture, right? Where you have some of that empathy, hopefully baked in. But you'll find people who are still in that third chakra and they're really wound up in themselves. And we call them narcissists. But it's just a really tight winding on the third chakra. And they haven't been able to come up into the heart and experience a little bit of empathy. So that's three. And then now, very interestingly, when we look at the nervous system, we look at that 50 shades of attachment, right? We look at that horse's tail, it's just everywhere. But when you come up into the heart, it becomes consolidated, right? But now you're actually stepping in, you're kind of in an in-between place, right? So you've got one foot in this other's heart-based world, and then you have one foot in your own selfishness. And that creates this kind of interweaving, right? So you find personalities, you find these souls who are weaving their way through empathy, and selfishness. And so if you look at the, what is it, the Kabbalah, where they've got the upper part of the spine, and then they fracture that part out, right? It's like, what are they doing, right? Because the nervous system's going this way, but they're trying to show that balancing between empathy and so the heart and the throat chakra and the medulla and the crown, and then on this side you've got selfishness, right? So you're dancing between those two parts of the nervous system. And so you'll find people that, for example, somebody who, one of the things they like to do is follow a scripture, follow a book, follow the law, and follow the rules in the military. And that personality will be bound to a way. We know it's right because it was said to be right. And that is somebody who is attempting to leave selfishness and come up into the heart, right? And then you follow that long enough, and so you'll follow. So there was a psychologist. He had a very interesting hypothesis to begin with, that you'll go through a phase where you're oriented outward, and then you'll go through a phase where you're oriented inward. And that will go back and forth and back and forth. And so you'll spend some time doing what you believe is right, and then you'll come back and you say, okay, I get that, but then I want to reintroduce my own goals and my own ambition as well. And so that will kind of go back and forth. And then you come up into the heart into a greater way. And that's kind of a so then you find people who are all about love, 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 everything love. And it's kind of exactly like the story, the beautiful little story that Delson said, look, everything is love. Everything is love. We're just going to walk out into this world and everything is love. And then the elephant tramples on them. They're like, how did this happen? Well, you didn't have enough wisdom. You just had a glimpse, right? And you're trying to apply that love to everything and everything and everything and everything. And it's just not quite work. It's not it's not possible in a practical way. You have to ground some of that love in some very practical wisdom, right? And so then you come into this understanding that everything is a system, that everything, now you get a working knowledge of everything. So Kriya is a system, the jhanas are a system, all these things are a system, and they're trying to teach you a principle. And so you start to hone in on those principles, right? You start to hone in on the deep aspects of it. And then you reach a place where everything starts to become one. And I love this story. So John is one of my students. He called me up. He's actually forgotten. So he's in this phase where he's renouncing everything. He's forgotten this story, but this story is burned on my heart. I love it. So he calls me up. He goes, I feel myself in other people. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. So that's some of that union. We were talking about having the experience, and you're sipping the experience over and over again, and then it becomes a part of you, and you get a deeper glimpse. And so he's getting this really beautiful, huge glimpse into this union, right? He goes, oh, I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. You know, that's from the union. That's from the samadhi that you're experiencing over and over again. He goes, yeah. But I feel myself in the table. So he was not only feeling himself in other people, in other consciousness, but he's feeling himself in the table, right? He's like, this is weird. You know, I can look at the table and I can feel myself in the table. And I just love that story. And I interviewed him recently. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot about all of that. And I'm like, oh my God, that's fine. I'll remember the story. I love this story. And yeah, it's just a gorgeous example of that. And it's not that it's not one and done. It's something which was growing inside of him, right? And so he's actually moved on from that story. It's not one and done. It's a continuous growth. It's a continuous exploration. But he came to this place where he was feeling himself in the table. Really beautiful. So that's kind of that a window into that union, right? That union consciousness, which comes over you more and more. But you might come up to a state like this, or like the heart, like the Ramayana. So in the Ramayana, we're winning that war, we're coming up into the heart, we're experiencing love, and then you might fall back down. You fall back down into your lower concerns. You get worried about something. You get stressed out about something. Something comes up and slaps you on the side of the face, and you weren't ready for it, and you couldn't handle it, and you didn't have enough peace and calm. And you get wrapped up in it. You're like, oh my God, I've fallen. And I remember beautifully, beautifully, Ashok told me, he said, I don't care how many times you fall. I care how many times you get up. And it was just out of nowhere he said that. He was a stickler, you know. He didn't mind yelling at you. And so it was so just out of the nowhere, he just hit me with that. It wasn't even related to anything that we were talking about. He just all of a sudden he goes, I don't care how many times you fall. I care how many times you get back up. I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. It was very compassionate. And so you're gonna find, I think we've all will find or have found that we will come up into the heart and then we'll fall back down. And then you'll come up into the heart and you'll fall back down. This is what Delson was talking about. These things come up, our gunk comes up, and we have these tools. Oh, yeah, okay, I fell down, but I have the tool. I have the bloody tool. Nobody can take it away from me. I love this story. So I'm learning Aikibudo from Stuart Lyle, and he starts telling me about his history. And he goes, yeah, so I was learning from BJ Carlis. And BJ Carlis was a phenomenal Aikidoist. And he was also a kahuna, but he had a really big thing for the ladies. So he would spend all of his classes flirting with all the girls in his class, and he would ignore these men who were the guys that were really trying to get the martial art from him, and eventually inherited it and carried it on. And so Stuart's going through all of this. So the thing was, BJ got upset with Stuart for some odd reason. And so he threatens him. He goes, well, I ought to strip you of your belt. I think I'm going to strip you up from your belt and, throw you out of this place. And Stuart said beautifully, very yogically, very Zen-like. He goes, that's fine, but you can't take what I have. He says, I can take your belt. I can take everything. It's like, that's fine. Take it. I don't care. You can't take what I got from you already. And immediately BJ, of course, respected him 1,000 times more. It's like, oh my God, this guy's serious. He's not here for fame or name or, to be the next, I'm going to take this dojo over. No, he's there because he loves it. And that's it. So you get these learnings, you get these techniques, you make them your own, you do them over and over again. You fall down, it doesn't matter. You've got I can get back. I can get back there. And that's a beautiful thing. And you start to have this confidence when you come into a deep state. You go, oh yeah, this is nice. Let me write this down because I'll be back. I'll be coming back. I'll be coming back around. This is too good to this is too good to leave on the table. I'll be back here. So that was quite enough rambling, right?
That was beautiful. Thank you very much.
That was awesome.
I think I'm just going to hand it off to you, Delson, and let you riff.
What was the question, John?
uh,
Sky's the ceiling.
I guess I was asking about axes of development and group awakenings, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been recently reading this book called Radical Wholeness. It was recommended to me by a good friend and a teacher of the Tibetan tradition, Andrew Holacek, and it's a book written by Ken Wilber. So those of you who are familiar with Ken Wilber will understand where I'm coming from. But I really am resonating with it, given the fact that it talks about. I kind of touched upon it, and Forrest has been touching upon it as well, where Ken Wilber talks about waking up, which we all kind of have an understanding of either conceptually or through some kind of experience. But then there are other aspects to it. There's growing up, there's showing up, there's cleaning up. And so what do we talk about when we're saying, this process of growing up? From where are we growing up? We're growing up from exactly what Forrest is talking about. The the root chakra, the Muladhara, which essentially means the base, the foundation of everything. And it's interesting that you're talking about how that's the twin, the Swadhisthana. I liked how you said about the taste, that's how we're able to relish our food. Swadhisthana actually literally means that, to relish something. It's the place of relishing. But the chakras, when we think about those, are exactly how Forrest is talking about. Like, we are evolving through the chakras and experiencing all of these, like in the third, we're experiencing more influence, we're experiencing ourselves, we're experiencing the me, the mind. This is mine, this, and then there's a separateness of, like, I am here and this is them, and there's an us versus them, and then there's a realization that no, there's a greater collective here. And the empathy arises. I start to look at what it is that the other person is feeling. I might be upset at them, but then if I try to go and wear their shoes and understand where they're coming from, I realize that that's just my projection onto them of what I think is should be the case or shouldn't be the case. And then from there, that empathy develops into greater compassion. Everybody, no matter it's my friend or my enemy or anybody I know or don't know, everybody is in this samsara. And this samsara is, I think, John, you and I were talking about this earlier when we were talking about some practices related with compassion, that it's a charnel ground. Like, everybody is suffering. Every single person is suffering, whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. But when you start to see it for yourself, you start to see it in others, you develop this greater degree of compassion. Then, of course, there is the systems-based thinking that Forrest is talking about. And then there is the taste of oneness that you experience as you get into the sixth and then seventh chakras. What I would add to that is so that's the growing up, part of it, with the waking up, if I remember correctly. And then there's the cleaning up part, which is the realization that anything that upsets you or evokes a strong emotional response is essentially something that you are hiding from. So in other words, if I am upset at somebody because they said something to me, because they said what I felt like I'm not good enough because of what they said, then what I'm doing is I'm basically looking at them and saying that they are telling me this, but they are the ones who aren't seeing this, and I get angry at them. And so there's the me, and then there's the them, or the me and the you and the you. And then from there, there's this, like, I separate that and say, no, it's not my anger. I'm not upset. It's just anger itself. But there's still a resistance there until we start to take ownership of it and say, actually, I am angry and I accept this anger in myself. I am sad and I accept this sadness in myself. And therefore, I can forgive the other person for being the way they are, because I understand what that feels like. And this is how you start to clean up your shadows. We have something else known as golden shadows, where we project this idealized version of who someone should be. Oh, I put them on a pedestal. Oh, this person is all compassionate, all good. They are my superhero. And we stop looking at those qualities in ourselves. Right? So there is this conjunction of not just waking up, but also of growing up and cleaning up and showing up and so on. And I think when we talk about a collective evolution, that is possible. And I think that is happening on a global scale. Maybe not exactly the way we might be envisioning it, but if we were to look at how history has unfolded and what history has told us through this process, with the discovery of fire and other things, that has enabled us to, experience other kinds of states. We're able to stay awake longer because of light, because of fire. We're able to digest our food easier. We realize that when we are in a group setting, we are much stronger. From there, we realize that, okay, if we are to be in the group, we need to follow certain structures and systems. All of these things have their utilities in accordance with the evolution of humankind as it's going forward. But at some point, then we realize those same structures might be limiting in some way. And so we try to transcend. The problem is every few hundred years or every couple of millennia or something, you'll find some person who starts to question the system and the structures, right? And these people are people like the Buddha, like Jesus, like Krishna, like Muhammad, like all of these great religious figures. And they try to subvert what has already been there, not because they're trying to bring down the system, but they're trying to clarify what it is that was the original, so-called original truth. And then what happens is over the few centuries, that message is taken, and that same message becomes self-limiting. The Buddha, when he came into the world, he realized that there was a lot of ritualism, there was a lot of animal sacrifice, there was a lot of asceticism, there was a lot of all of these things that were not leading to what was talked about in the Vedas. A lot of people think that Buddhism rejects the Vedas. But if you go back into the Pali Canon, Buddha talks about it with sincere respect and acknowledgement of the Vedas. And what he's doing is he's saying there is another way of doing this. And he's talking about going back to the original source. Then what happened? Over the centuries that followed after the Buddha's death, the same things that he was fighting against, the structures of asceticism, the structures of we need to create rituals and rites, and we need to create all of these things, rites like rites, like different kinds of ritualistic aspects that you see in some certain monastic circles of Buddhism. That has self-limited the capacity for people outside of the monastic tradition to even think that they can experience awakening. It's like it's a kind of gatekeeping. And it's not just Buddhism, it's not just Christianity, it's any kind of um, great revolutionary idea that comes across. And so we have to be self-aware as a society. Where are we heading? In what direction are we taking ourselves in? But it always comes back to the individual. It always comes back to, okay, I am a part of a cellular system that makes up the entire body of humanity, that makes up the entire environment of the earth. That earth makes up the entire scape of the solar system. That makes up the entire galaxy, and that galaxy makes up the entire universe, and so on and so forth. How deep can I go, and how wide can I spread my net from my heart so that I can include everything, everywhere, all at once? And if everyone is able to do that in the ideal world, just imagine where we would go, what we would be doing. Forget about, planetary colonies and all of these other things. We would be really a different kind of society. So I think we have that capacity and there is potential for that to happen. But there is still like these political um, ideologies, religious ideologies that people identify with. Doesn't matter the ideology, it's the identification and attachment to these ideologies that limit them from transcending beyond those things and seeing the greater picture, the greater whole of what we are capable of as one unitary or unified field of existence. I'm sorry, I just went so idealistic there at the end, but that's
I asked you to riff. You riffed. um, I'm just gonna cut to the chase with this question for both of you. If you could summarize awakening in one sentence, what would it be? Maybe we'll start with Forrest.
Ah, beautiful. Well, I've got a really great answer, which I actually already gave you, which is one, two, three. So dorsal vagal, which is your longer out breath. It's your HRV resonance. It's the Om Japa in the chakras. It's the ascension into the upper nervous system. So that's all of Kriya right there. So dorsal vagal, then your left amygdala, that's bliss, that's love, that's joy. That's when I say love, I mean the pure, pure love, like real love. Like when somebody says, "Oh, I love you don't know where they're coming from when they say that. But when the mother tells the child, "I love you," then of course that's real love, right? The pure love of a mother, good mother, right? Sometimes we have bad experiences, but thank God we're alive, right? So, so just the really pure love, the purest love that we can imagine. That's the left amygdala, that pure joy. Sometimes we say happiness. And I was with Ashok and I'm describing some of my experiences in meditation. And I dared to say, oh, I just get up and I just get really happy. He goes, it's not happiness. He yelled at me. He goes, it's not happiness. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find words to express what I'm feeling. He's like, it's not. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that. I get that. It's not happiness. It's transcendent. He says, happiness is dualistic, right? Happiness, oh, I don't have this. I want it. I crave it. I get it. Now I'm happy. Now I can allow myself that happiness because I got what I wanted. And then life says, oh, that's interesting. You're resting on that, right? That now you're happy, and life takes it away. This is oh my God. Now I'm not happy, right? Now our mind and our heart they deteriorate because we have nothing to stand on, and so we go into the heart, and then it's pure love, it's pure joy, it's transcendent of what we're experiencing. So life is up, great. I have joy. Life is down. That's okay. I have joy. It's transcendent of the moment, right? So that's the left amygdala expansion, right hippocampus. So to make it really easy, dorsal vagal, left amygdala, right hippocampus. That's it. And that's all the way into the non-dual state. In the non-dual state, we're transcending the body. So it's kind of over. We've gotten to the point we're getting over that story of the dorsal vagal. We've already used that. And now we're getting straight into the deep brain, left amygdala, bliss, right hippocampus. So it's Sat Chit Ananda, right? And that's how you know the non-dual state is complete because it got all the way to bliss. That's how you know. So very easy. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm thinking of this story where the Tibetan teacher meets the Korean Zen master, and the Korean Zen master pulls out an orange and says, "What is this? What is this?" And then the Tibetan teacher turns to an aide and goes like, "Has he never seen an orange before?" so, so I'll hand it over to Zen Master Delson now.
Oh goodness. Oh wow. Okay, with that introduction, um, the way I understand and look at awakening is it is essentially a continuous process of getting out of that's it, getting out of the way. What does that mean? Getting out of the way of the flow of life. Somehow the thinking mind thinks it knows better, that it thinks that it knows how to deal with, but it only knows how to deal with some parts of life which it requires, like logic and analysis, rationality, and all of these other things, mechanistic things, and so on. But life is so much more than that. And so getting out of that process, one of the things that I've been talking about more and more often is, first of all, there's a word in Buddhism and in other circles that talk about renunciation. And that's the kind of difficult word to talk about or concept to talk about to people who are living householder lives. What do you mean renunciation? Does that mean I have to let go of my family and go into the forest or go into a monastery and so on? No, there's another way of looking at it. What about contentment? What about being here right now and surrendering fully to what is available to you right now and being totally content? That is what the Buddhists would also call disenchantment. disenchantment. You're no longer enchanted by the snares of this matrix of the sense basis, that this is all there is to it. By the very fact that we transcend, as Forrest said, we transcend all of these things when we get up into the head and we experience a non-dual state, it shows us there's something more available to us. It's the same thing Jesus said when he talked about the kingdom of heaven is within you. He said, first seek the kingdom of heaven and everything else will be given unto you. What does that mean? When you have that, then you have such a strong foundation that it doesn't matter whether you win or lose in this so-called game of life. It doesn't matter whether you are having fame or you're being defamed or people are talking about you behind your back or you have money or you lost it at the casino, back to the casino, or whatever is happening, you know, you are still fully content with everything that's going on. Doesn't mean that you don't get irritated, doesn't mean that you don't get moved, doesn't mean that you don't get stimulated, but you have that wisdom to fall back upon. And sometimes that wisdom is not available to you. And that's where the greater understanding that this entire cosmos is alive. And therefore, that which I am is also you. That which I am is also that person, and so on and so forth. So if we look at ourselves as a greater whole and we forget sometimes that wisdom, there are other people to remind us of it. And that is the same thing in me that is in that person speaking back to me that same wisdom, right? So it is the complete realization of not only the illusory and transactional nature of the ego, but realizing that that ego also is within the scope of all that there is. Therefore, we don't vilify the ego either. We just understand the ego as a process, whether that's right, that's the left brain, that's the thinking part of the mind. I've got my directions all crisscrossed. But anyway, it's the thinking part of the mind that causes us to be limited in ourselves. But we are letting that go. So awakening is the complete dissolution of the ego, whether it's for a small period of time or whatever, to come to the larger understanding where I and me and that and this and you and so on are all one and the same.
Beautiful. And on that note, I wonder if we could open it up to questions. And I see there's already a question from Tony.
Hi, thank you for great conversation and happy New Year to all. One question I have, I'm teaching in the yoga studio, and I often talk about the metta and give meditation and talk about jhanas, but then some of the yoga teachers that I talk to, they try to say, when you talk about, let's say, infinite space, is it the heart chakra because that's the spaciousness? What do you mean by infinite consciousness? So they try to, in their mind, correlate the two system. I know in Buddha, Buddha didn't talk about chakras, and in Theravada or Buddhism, there is no speak of chakras. But I wanted to ask Forrest and Delson, what are is there any similarities between the two systems? Like, is one jhana can correspond to one chakra, or if somebody is practicing chakras, awakening, if they start practicing metta or Brahma Vihara, they're gonna mix up the two system or not. Thank you.
Oh, it's completely compatible, which is why we're here. And Delson and I are here, right? We're here together because we
Mm.
find it completely compatible. So great question. And expansiveness is really at the crown. So you look at the 1,000-petaled lotus, and what are they showing you? It's showing you that it opens. And so that's where the expansiveness is in the chakras. Now you might have an experience in your heart and might get quite big, and you might have, so there are different ways that you can experience it. But if you want to really specify and really bring it down, it's right at the crown where we
Mm.
come into that expansiveness. So
So is there one jhana, let's say the first jhana is more root chakra and then the second goes to second, etc. Is there a corresponding comparison between jhanas and chakras?
So when you come, so first we're trying to get out of the mess. So I showed that picture of the horse's tail at the beginning
Hmm.
of this talk, which I can show you again. It's always fun. So that that horse's tail, right? That
Hmm.
mess of the lower nervous system, we're trying to overcome that. And so that's that first three chakras that we're getting through. And then we're getting up into the heart, into empathy, into loving kindness. And so wherever those fit within the jhanas, that's going to be the beginning of the upper nervous system. And then you're going to come into the throat. The throat is associated with wisdom. And I think that would be associated with compassion. And then we come up into the medulla. We start to get very, very free. And that freedom gives you an automatic joy. And then they all kind of mix together. So you've got love and joy and bliss and peace and tranquility. And we have this wonderful word, equanimity, right? So it's describing
Right.
all of that together. So,
Mm.
so there's
No, that's
you.
great. So I guess the first three chakras then gonna be kind of like a rupa jhana, materialistic ones, and then when you get to upper chakras, it goes to arupa jhanas, the material jhanas, basically.
When you're coming into absorption, that's so we have in yoga, we have, I'll probably mispronounce it. So we have dharana, which is clarity. It's usually associated with concentration, but my problem with that word of concentration is people treat it like they're trying to concentrate on something really hard,
Oh,
because that's
right.
what they do in the world. And that's the wrong kind of concentration. A little bit of that is okay, but a lot of that is wrong because you're getting back into your left brain processes. So really it's a shedding of this, right? We're shedding that
Hmm.
and we're getting past that and we're opening up into this upper nervous system and things just automatically become more clear. That's a much better word for dharana. And then dhyana, which is absorption. So once so if you look at the second set of the immaterial jhanas, that is absorption. They're talking about these absorption states, and that will lead into the union state. So maybe that clarifies a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thank you. I wonder if Delson has got comments. It would be great to hear
Yeah,
his
like
comments.
I was touching upon this a little earlier when Forrest was talking about, the process of the chakras and then going through, the heart and so on. And I was talking about contextualizing it from the perspective of the jhanas. So the first three are to be transcended, right? So when we transcend that, we're letting go of the hindrances, the distractions of the outside world, and so on. And then, and then that's when we're experiencing pratyahara. So, Forrest was talking about dharana and dhyana and so on. Uh, Prior to all of that, there's pratyahara, where the mind starts to withdraw from the sense experiences. It's like the tortoise, withdrawing its limbs. And so, how are we doing that? We are becoming secluded from sensual pleasures. It means we're being secluded from the outside world. And then, as we start to experience the loving kindness and the compassion and so on, we're starting to get up into, all of the different four jhanas, and then we start to experience infinite space and consciousness and so on. So, we could try to bring a level of um, parallel sort of understanding of the jhanas
Mhm.
and the chakra system, but I don't know to what extent it's useful for anyone, because it's only helpful for our minds, our thinking minds. And everybody who comes into any system will look at it in order to essentially what's the word? Not verify, but basically said, you see, this confirms that this is what my system looks like, or this is what this
Mm.
system looks like. So I don't know to what extent it's useful in the ultimate sense of the word, because it will only create more confirmation bias for, oh, this is
Mm.
what it is like, and that this is what it's like from here, and this is what it's like from there. Although there is great correspondence to it,
Mm.
just saying from the greater spirit of things, let's not get lost into the weeds of what this
Right.
is.
No, I guess the comparison is great in terms that if in the yoga community they are practicing with chakras and they want to practice meta, suddenly they say, oh, this system is different than system, but actually they aren't, as you and Forrest beautifully mentioned. So understanding that one system doesn't interfere with the other one, it may remove some hindrances from some people to practice both of them because they really not different from each other, right?
What I really love to do for my students is let's set up a buffet. So I don't tell you what to eat. I recommend.
Mhm.
So this is a main course and this is a main course. So I highly recommend it. But it's really a buffet. And so you have this beautiful buffet. And so now we're increasing the buffet. We have Delson's buffet. We have my
Mm.
buffet, and we put them together, and it's like, oh my god, I got more tools for my tool
Mm.
belt. So you take out a tool and you use it for a while, man, I love this tool, and you put it in your tool belt, you use another tool.
Mm.
So it's kind of beautiful. You've got more choices, more
Right.
maps, and yeah, so it definitely corresponds, and very, very, very useful
Mm.
on both sides.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I mean, I often close the yoga classes with metta meditation, and you totally see the face of the people open up, a smile. Some of them, there's so much enjoy, they cry. It's fascinating to bring the two together. It's powerful. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Okay. Any other questions? We're at an hour and 40 minutes, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I have a question, which is in Groundhog Day, there's a scene where they're throwing cards into a hat, and uh, and she says to him, "Is this what you do with eternity?" And so he's like, "Be the hat, be the hat." So I'd like to ask each of you, like, what do you do with eternity? Like, what's
Mm.
having had this sort of good, traction with awakening, if you can say that. Um, what's your artistic expression of that? Um, Maybe Delson, you can start.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love to do is go down YouTube rabbit holes of different kinds of things, whether it's psychology or neuroscience, spirituality, or even conspiracy theories. Yes, I'm a conspiracy theory nut sometimes, but doesn't mean I believe all of it. It's just for entertainment purposes. But that's the thing. How do you spend your time? What do you do with your time? And I like to do that sometimes. And when I get a chance to spend time with friends, we will either, go around, try new things in terms of restaurants and foods and all of that. And I like to travel a lot too. So I'm always traveling, whether it's um, for work, so-called work, because I'm not really working. I'm just having a lot of fun no matter what I'm doing. Um, it just feels like work when, you have deadlines, and you have things you have to do, contracts to sign and stuff like that. But other than that, it's just a lot of fun. You get to meet new people. I mean, that's how I met you, John, in Japan. You had organized with Joseph the retreat in Japan. That was great. And the retreat was fun, but then the stuff around that was also fun, which is where we went around. We went to Kamakura, and we went to places in Tokyo and so on. But my point is, I love traveling, and I'm always traveling somewhere or another. Here I am in Goa for about a month. I'll be going somewhere else in February. And the funny thing is, these things just unfold. A friend of mine will say, "Hey, we're going somewhere. Do you want to tag along?" And I can't help myself but say yes. I don't know how the tickets are going to be booked, where we're going to be staying, what's going to happen. All I just say is yes. And so I'm always just traveling somewhere or another, whether it's within India or outside of India, to do, whether it's like going to temples, going on a safari, checking out the beaches, whatever it is. So I've been traveling since I was like 13, like a serious traveler. And other than that, I do like to, pass the time reading books, like I was talking about, reading Ken Wilber's book and other books like that. Um, what else could you do? I mean, spend time with family, of course. It's just all the boring stuff, what's seemingly boring. I'm not meditating in a cave, levitating, avatar style, with my third eye open and looking into the future and going and visiting other planets and things like that. No, it's doing boring stuff. So-called boring stuff.
Great. How about you, Forrest?
I love that. Lots of boring stuff. Yes. And the boring stuff becomes very beautiful. And I love that. You reminded me of that movie with Jim Carrey. Yes. What is it? Yes, Man?
Yes, man.
That was hilarious. Oh my God. I love a good movie. And you can't always find, like, sometimes nowadays it's hard to find a really good movie with a really good story. But like that was a great story. I love movies. So another Jim Carrey movie is very, very Buddhistic, I think, which is, what was that one where he was in a movie studio? They had him grow up in a movie studio.
The
The
Truman
Truman
Show.
Show. Yeah, that one. That was great. That's the story of the Buddha, right? He grew up and it was a fake life,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, so I love a good movie. I love a good story. I'm doing lots of phone calls, which is great. And I'm doing a lot of work with my daughter. We're learning to read and write and math and all that fun stuff. And so we're having lots of time reading together and also watching. So I love to introduce like some classic movies like The Goonies. Oh my God, that's so much fun. What's another really great? I can't think of another really great movie that I've watched with my daughter. Oh, The Never Ending Story. Oh my God, that's fun. Really got to get all the classics in, you know. This is classical education right here. So, yeah, that's I've been working on a training for Gayatri Mantra, so almost through that. I actually wanted to finish it last year, but here we are. So I'm very excited for that, and yeah, that's beautiful. So yeah, just lots of boring stuff, and then there's a for the internal world. There's a quote from Yogananda. I think this is one of the best quotes from him. And he said, for the spiritual aspirant who is on the right path, their spiritual unfoldment will become as natural as breathing. Isn't that beautiful? So Delson was mentioning this natural unfoldment, right? And so, that will happen inside of you. This just one thing will unfold, and then another thing will unfold, and another thing will unfold and present itself to you. So it's really beautiful to see where it goes. And so, yeah,
Nice. It sounds like, what is it? Mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers, or whatever it is.
that's
Life
right.
gets
that's
lost
right.
in the marketplace.
That's right. What does the guy say? What is that saying? Before enlightenment, I wash the plate, I chop
Yeah,
wood, I carry water. After enlightenment, I wash the plate, I chop wood, and I carry water.
that's it.
Beautiful. Here's a couple of, well, here's one question. Does attending events such as the Kumbh Mela, that's a pilgrimage, I think, benefit our spiritual development? Is there a way to ensure we use them for our development and not just for novelty.
Beautiful.
Oh, let me step into this. Oh, go ahead, Forrest. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that really quick, and then we'll switch over to Delson. Lahiri Baba was very adamant. So he actually had, this is a fun story. He had somebody come to him. They're like, I'm going on a pilgrimage. And he told them, no, you're not. They're like, what? I mean, I can't even, I don't, I'm a little more hands off than that. But he's like, no, you're not going on a pilgrimage. It's like, what? No, you're going to stay home and you're going to practice your Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is the pilgrimage. And so he was trying to get away from the outward, and that's not to say that you go on this journey and it gives you something. And I've had students do that where they went on this journey and it was great and it gave them something. But the real core is always going to be your own experience. So even if you go on a journey, it's how is it changing me? What is it doing to me? Where am I going? What is it revealing to me? All that noticing, right? But I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I mean that totally resonates with me because I was going to say something similar, which is, to be a little corny, life itself is a pilgrimage. I mean, you're always on pilgrimage one way or the other, and that happens internally with the practice. But it's interesting that you mentioned the Kumbh Mela because it's going on right now as we speak, the Maha Kumbh Mela, which happens every 100 years. I'm very sorry I'm missing it, but it's what it is. It's within our destiny, let's say, if we can make it or not. But in any case, I think there's some great karmic unfoldings that can happen, not just in pilgrimage sites and going to these places and all of this stuff, but just in life in general. And the the yogic, the ancient yogis, they set up these temples or places as like energy grounds, like energy transmitting centers. And so for those folks who weren't able to do some kind of sadhana, which is to say like Kriya Yoga or going through the jhanas or doing any kind of meditative practice, this was for the people who didn't either have time or have the knowledge or access to somebody who could teach them these things. And they would go to these sites, whether it was every day or every week or whatever it was, as a way of absorbing that energy, those vibrations from these energy centers, which were set up by different kinds of yogis. I'm reminded of, for example, Sadhguru who set up the Dhyana Lingam at the Isha Center. Thousands of people go there to learn meditation, but then they get such great benefit also from going to the Dhyana Lingam and just meditating there because of the way it's set up. But there comes a point, just like when you have had enough acid, just like when you've had enough mushrooms, just like when you've had enough DMT, where you're like, you know what? Why do I have to keep picking up the phone? I got the message, right? Like Alan Watts would say. So I've got the message. This is what I can get from visiting these temples. That bhakti that I experience, I can generate myself through through the cute baby meditation, through loving kindness, the awe that I experience by being with crowds of people going and coming together in one place and absorbing all of this energy I can get by experiencing compassion for all beings, going through that spaciousness, going through that infinite space, infinite consciousness, and so on. I'll tell you from my personal experience, I had actually gone to South India earlier last year, actually last January, and I had gone to something like, I think like 9 or 10 temples in like 8 or 9 days or something. It was like a jam-packed itinerary. We were going from temple after temple after temple. And there were these great stories around the temples, and there were these great myths about these temples. And if you looked at, first of all, we didn't even have time to go into the detailing of each aspect of the temples. If you pick up on certain things, like you can actually get some encoded information while being in those temples. But you can only do that if you have a certain level of sadhana, if you have a certain level of practice. For example, there's a temple called Chidambaram. And it's said to be a temple, or the grounds on which it was built upon was created as an energy field cultivated by Patanjali and another sage. And so all of the spiritual energy that it took to create the Yoga Sutras, like channeling that information, he took all of that and he put it into this energy center. And so you walk into this field and you can really feel that sort of bliss. I remember like being on the bus and just not even entering the vicinity, just getting into the village where the temple is. And I was already like in this samadhi state. I was just like in my chair like this, completely blissed out. And then you're walking into it, and it's like this nuclear bomb of like energy. And there's this crystal Shivaling, which was established by Adi Shankara, the very first Shankaracharya. And you look at it and you experience another wave of bliss. But you realize, or at least I realize, like, okay, these kinds of experiences I've already come to through my practice, through my many years of cultivating meditative practices, whether it's Kriya Yoga, whether it's jhanas, whether it's any other system. I can get these states wherever I go, whatever it is that I do. When I was in San Diego, I had a chance to experience Molly, MDMA. And it's such a heart opener, right? It just expands the heart, and you feel empathy and compassion for all beings. But now you can recreate that through your own meditation practice by opening the heart with compassion. So I think these temple sites that people go to, or pilgrimages that people go to, if you're going there because you want to cleanse your karma and because you want to do all these rituals, okay, that's maybe where a person is at. But at least that's a starting point for some people to get inspired to find something within themselves. When I went to Rishikesh, for example, with my teacher, and I was reading the autobiography of a yogi, it inspired me to know more about these sages, to know more about these sadhus, to know more about what kind of techniques were they doing. So my only advice to anyone who wants to do that is go ahead. If you want to experience it, go ahead and experience it. But what are you taking from it, and how is it inspiring you to go deeper into the spiritual life?
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Well, we are at the coming up to the 2 hour mark now, I think. Any final thoughts, final questions? Anybody have a question? Going once, going twice? All right. Well, thank you so much, Forrest and Delson. This has been wonderful. This was our fifth of 7 talks, and next week at the same time we'll have talk number 6, which is the householder yogi, practice and awakening outside of monastic models. So that promises to be a really exciting one, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you all so much. Thank you for
Thank you. And
Thank you.
John,
Thank you.
again, you're a real champion. Like, I don't know what time it is there now, but it's just amazing what
Yeah.
you do.
It's only 3:00, 3:30, sorry.
Is that
Is
all?
that- yeah,
Is that all, John?
yeah. No,
My
I
God, thank you so much.
I used to call this the graveyard shift, but here it's kind of like the opposite. This is the coming back to life shift right now. I'm loving it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Yo, bye bye.
Bye.